Hello and welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 574, and I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility through this medium since 2005. So today, I wanted to give a little life lately update. I asked for your input and questions on Instagram last week, so a big thank you to everyone who took a moment to just share, what are you curious about? But really, I thought it would be helpful also just to share, where have I been? I don't know that I've ever honestly taken a month off of this podcast. And it wasn't necessarily intentional. It's just one of those things that happened as lots of life was going on, which I will share with you in a moment, some updates. But what I want to share is what to expect in this podcast. So you guys sent some great questions. Some of them I'm going to save for a future entire podcast episode. They were so good. There's just so many wonderful kind of inquiries, and I want to make sure that I give them ample airtime. But the ones that you're going to hear about today, I always love sharing, what am I reading right now? What am I inspired by with regard to reading? Because one of you, actually a couple of you asked, what am I inspired by lately? And there's so much to share with that I'm actually going to save that for a future podcast. But I do want to share what I've read so far this year. How I organize an all-black closet. So that was a question, such a good question. We'll definitely answer that. Memoir updates. How's my memoir coming? Many of you know I've been working on this for, my goodness, 8 years now. So I'll give an update there. Why I chose practice as my word of the year. I know it's kind of a random word, right? So I will definitely give insights into that. And then finally, how we're handling being displaced for 2 months during condo renovations. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, obviously, also in a moment. So as I mentioned, there are a few remaining questions from Instagram that I'm going to answer in a future podcast. And they range from my favorite teapot. It's actually back at the condo. And so I want to give you a photo of it because it's absolutely adorable. And I picked it up from Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens. And I love their gift shop. And anyway, it is a beautiful, beautiful setting by philanthropist and collector Marjorie Merriweather. And it's just stunning. Those of you in DC, you must check it out and definitely hit the gift store. Anyway, so that's where my favorite teapot is from. So I want to be able to give a photo of it and share a little bit about it. And I don't have that because it is packed up at home. So that's going to be in a future podcast. Pet updates. Some of you had asked, what's going on with the pets? We still have 3 amazing little critters. So I'll be sure to give an update on that soon. Working on in ballet. That was such a great question. And I will give you some insights into that shortly. Helen had a wonderful question. Last week, I was doing this 2-day ACT training, and ACT is acceptance commitment therapy. Really beautiful work. And it was all day. It was 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then I was seeing clients afterwards. But in between, during breaks and my lunch, I just slipped off my shoes and put on some ballet slippers that I had in my bag, and I did some ballet. And her question was how do you do a quick pivot like that when a lot of us would just scroll through our phones? And let me just tell you, Helen, I definitely sometimes do that also, but I knew I needed to move. Whenever you are absorbing and learning for 16 hours in 2 days, you got to move your body, right? So I will definitely talk about that in a future podcast episode because I really, really liked that question. And then also what's inspiring me. That was a question. And I want to, again, give that more airtime. So let me dive into what I want to share and can share with you today, and also mention to save the date, April 9th is our next virtual retreat. So as you may know, I have limited a lot of my offerings this year to really focus on the Coterie, which is my year-long program that launched on December 31st. And so I'm not doing, some of the regular offerings, but I am still doing quarterly retreats, which are included in the coterie, and it's the one coterie event that we open up to the public to also be able to join. So if you are interested in a virtual retreat, please check that out, and that's at KimberlyWilson.com/virtual retreat. So that's the next thing on the agenda, and that's available. Also, be sure to subscribe to Tranquility du Jour in whatever podcast app you love. There's a link in the show notes to Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, so whatever it might be that you like to consume your podcasts in. And also, if you are new to Tranquility du Jour, big welcome. And there is a link to learn a little bit more about kind of the philosophy and all that good stuff about Tranquility du Jour. Finally, if you have a moment to pen a review, I would be so grateful. And then take a screenshot of it, send it to me, and I will send you a little handwritten love note. So my hope is it helps other people find the podcast, considering there are so many amazing podcasts out there. And we want to continue, hopefully, spreading tranquility far and wide. So a big thank you to my longtime listeners, my newer listeners. And again, if you have a moment to pen a review, would be so very grateful. All right, so let's dive in. So what am I reading? So 3 books that I have read this year so far is Don't Overthink It. Very good book by the modern Mrs. Darcy, which you may kind of follow her blog. It's a lot about reading. Anyway, this book is really good, filled with tons of therapeutic techniques. But for those of you who may relate to overthinking, I mean, it can come down to becoming paralyzed as to what tea you want to drink. And it's one of those things that many people, particularly women, struggle with. So I really loved that book. I thought there were some wonderful tips and great reminders. And then the second book that I read this year is I'm So Effing Tired, which was so good too, because this talked a lot about like leaky gut and Ayurveda and, probiotics and intermittent fasting and, things along those lines. It was a really good book that I enjoyed. And it also just reminded me of like, okay, you gotta cut back on the sugar, and you want to like start your day with the hot water with lemon. I used to be so good at that, and I'm trying to get back into it because now I start my day with these tablets that are by 8 Greens, and anyway, it has like alfalfa and all this stuff in it, and it's a fizzy tablet. You just drop it into your water, and voila, it's so yummy. But I want to get back into kind of like some of these little basics that are reminded about in that book, I'm So Effing Tired. And what I also really liked about the book is I think so many people can relate to being so effing tired right now. With the pandemic, with it being cold, for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, I find that February is a very hard month for people. The great news is spring is on the horizon, but for now, it's hard. And I think people are very tired. So good book, recommend it. And the one that I am reading now and I'm just about done with is called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Many of you have probably come across this book in various settings because it's a very recommended book with regard to understanding how fixed mindset or growth mindset can have such a massive impact on many areas of our lives. And a growth mindset is when you come at things with like, okay, I have the ability to learn or develop this skill or deepen my relationship. Whereas a fixed mindset is very much like, this is the way it is. This is how it is. This is how it will always be. There's not really room for development. Like I'm either gifted as a writer or I can develop my skill set as a writer, right? And if you don't feel like you were gifted or there's a innate gift and you're just automatically good at it, fixed mindset, you would not write. So very good book, highly recommend. And again, almost done with that one. So that's what I'm reading so far this year, enjoying all of them, and would definitely recommend them. Now, how do I organize an all black closet? So An all black closet. The way I do this, now I will say I also have some things sprinkled in. Quite a bit of faux leather. So I have like faux leather kind of leggings, faux leather wide leg crop pants, faux leather midi skirt, faux leather pleated midi skirt. So, I've got a few things that are, well, but those are all black also, so never mind. And then I do have like I think I have a gold and a silver skirt. So there are some additional colors sprinkled in. But what I do is at the beginning, I've got short sleeve shirts, and I have very few of those. It's mainly like the boyfriend tank from the TDJ collection, and I've got this like sequin tank that I actually wore for the New Year's virtual retreat over my 2-in-1 because I'm always in my 2-in-1 fitted top. But I picked that up in Paris at a thrift store, and I just love it. So there's that. There's like one that has another little sparkle. Anyway, so those are at the front. And then I move into longer sleeve tops. So again, they're all black, but like I can feel them and I know what they are. I also have a couple t-shirts in there, like t-shirts like the Compassion is the New Black tee. And then I move into pants and skirts. So those are organized really in no specific way. They're mainly just like all my pants and then all my skirts. Now, things that are more kind of TDJ pants, like my leggings, capri leggings that I wear every day, or my palazzo pants or things along those lines, a lot of those are folded up in a dresser. Okay, so I've got my short sleeve, long sleeve, pants, skirts, and then dresses, right? So that's kind of the trajectory of my closet. And then I just know like, if I reach for a sleeve, I will often know what that piece is, even though I don't have a light in my closet and the lighting in my bedroom is very dim. So it can be hard, but it really is a lot about feel and texture. So I know which pieces that I am looking for, because also one thing that I have is a boyfriend blazer that I picked up thrifted, and we are going to be doing one for TDJ actually for the spring collection, a boyfriend blazer. But, I can feel that because it's like got more of a silky texture. So anyway, that's how I organize it. And, it's quite easy for me. And it really is all about putting like with like. And I know some people like to color code their closet. Clearly that wouldn't work for me. But if that works for you, that's great. I tend to be more about like the type of item. So I hope that helps as you think about how to organize your closet if you too are an all, particular color type of lady or gent. All right, memoir updates. So for the past few weeks, I've been working on editing my recent draft that I pulled together last spring and going in, incorporating all the suggested edits, plus some additional pieces that I have written. And then I hope to get that to my writing teacher by end of February. So, the piece about this, and somebody recently asked, will you be talking about why you sold a studio in it? And, it really is all about like why I sold the studio. So the premise is, how do you go from like building and creating something that is your entire life, your entire identity, your entire baby, right? And then you decide that it no longer is right for you. And then how do you unravel that when so much is tied into it from like multiple employees? I mean, I think we had like 100 on staff by the time I left the studio or sold the studio. 50 teachers, and then plus like front desk staff and management and things along those lines, plus leases. And I mean, there was just so much, right? So just kind of talking about in this memoir, like the trajectory of the building of it, in the 1999, the early O's. And, that was such like a a fun time, very Sex in the City sort of time. And so it's just fun to kind of relive those moments a little, but also to have a little compassion and also shudder a bit towards who I was at that time, right? Like, well, more than 20 years ago. So it's interesting, the trajectory, and I will definitely be talking about that. And I hope that it will resonate with people as they think about who they are now, who they see themselves becoming, what happens when you recognize who you are and what you've committed to financially, emotionally, professionally, in all these different ways no longer resonates. What do you do? How do you make a decision to let something go? And then what happens as you let it go? So yes, I am working on it. Thank you so much for asking. And I've got the draft right here. Let's see. It is 112 double-spaced pages. It's almost 50,000 words. And again, that's just draft number 2. And there will be, probably many more drafts. And then I will pull together a book proposal, get it over to my agent, and then just see what happens. But yeah, it's crazy. I've been working on this book since 2014. And as you can imagine, the premise of the book has completely shifted because in 2014, the studio had its what do we call it? Quinceañera, right? It turned 15 and, it was a very different time and I had no intention of selling the studio at that time. So, it's been a really interesting dance of writing pieces and then recognizing, how it shifted over the past many years. So why I chose practice as my word of the year, I loved that question. And what's funny is when I wrote my last love note, it came out a couple weeks ago, and listeners, I'll put a link to it in the show notes in case you missed it, because I talk about the word that I had decided on, the word practice, just thinking that, so much of life these days really is, it's all about practice. My, ballet, it's a practice. Yoga, it's a practice. Writing is a practice. Showing up every day when you don't feel like it is a practice. And I was writing my piece for the love note that went out to the newsletter subscribers, I wrote about practice and I was like, oh my gosh, that's my word of the year, because I hadn't really honed in on one yet. And that it was like, aha, like angels sang. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is my word. And it may seem like a random word, but I think of practice as a verb, right? And, in the past, I've chosen beauty, right? How to have more beauty in every day, tranquility, spaciousness. Those have been a few. Creativity have been a few of my previous words. But practice is just a great reminder, too, to recognize that life is a practice. We show up to the best of our ability every day, and it's a practice. We get to begin again. We get to recognize we're not perfect. We get to start over, and we get to hopefully continue to grow and develop. So that was my rationale behind choosing practice, and thank you for that question. All right, so the last piece that really explains a bit about why things have been on pause a little over the past month is that we're displaced from the condo for 2 months. So it was our 18-year anniversary, meaning my partner Tim and I, a couple weeks ago. And what did we do? And I joked in the latest love notes, like people might picture, a romantic evening at home in front of the fire with the dogs and ordering Fancy Radish, which is our favorite vegan spot in DC. We did order Fancy Radish. We did hang out with the dogs, but what we were doing was packing up most of our belongings into bins. Okay, when you have lived in a place for 18 years, let me just tell you, the things you find in drawers, kitchen drawers, and under bathroom and kitchen sinks are like, it's just like, oh my gosh. And the amount of hair that was everywhere, with all of our animals, it was just like, oh my goodness. It like hides in all these crevices. Anyway, so very discombobulating. And I, have been talking to the contractors since May of last year. October chose all the like fixtures, the subway tile, the paint color, the cabinetry, the appliances. And this is for my kitchen and bathroom, which are tiny. Like, I think they may be 50 square feet. They are so tiny. And yet, it's going to take 2 months to do this. And of course, we had to get everything out of those spaces, everything. And then we had to make space for the contractors by turning the bed on its side, like pushing all the furniture to the side, all this sort of stuff, taking down all the pictures that could be bumped into accidentally by someone. And so that was quite the experience. And what was really interesting about it too, that I was surprised by how attached I am to my space. And I think many of you can probably relate to this. You probably are also, right? You have your desk set up. You have your drawer that has your stamps and your stationery. You have your, shelf that has your face serums and your toothpaste and your moisturizers and, whatever, right? And so, to have to pack all that up to choose, okay, what did I need to take to West Virginia? What did I need to take to Costa Rica? Because my mother and I are going there next week to spend a few days for the honor of my grandmother's 10-year anniversary of her passing. Now, over the past 20 years, we've been to this retreat center. Well, I've taught retreats there, and my mom came along for probably half of those retreats. Anyway, she loves it there. And I'm no longer doing the retreats, but I was like, let's go and be there over the weekend that we're usually there, which is President's Day weekend, and honor and just, recognize grandma. And so that's what we're doing. But of course, I had to pack a separate bag for that because that's like swimsuit and summer clothing. Then I had to pack another bag for jaunting back and forth to DC. So every week I'm going in Wednesday morning, seeing clients on Wednesdays, meeting with my contractor on Wednesdays, usually having doctor's appointments Thursday morning from like, oh my gosh, the amount of specialists I see. Dermatologist, rheumatologist, that's a new one, endocrinologist, ortho, I just have ortho on the phone, my orthopedic doctor who is for my shoulder, and then I have one for my hip that I'm going to see Thursday morning. It's just like, oh my gosh, you guys, aging is no joke. And anyway, so I just tried to get all those scheduled over the next couple months to fit within the time frame that I'm in DC. So, these are all these different bags for all these different things. And that was just, it's very disorienting. So the wonderful news is I have a dear friend who lives in DC, but her family's in Spain. And she decided to stay in Spain longer due to the pandemic after the holidays. And so she offered me her place to stay as I'm coming back and forth to DC, which is just so, so generous and so, so lovely because it's like 5 minutes from my condo, 5 minutes from my office. Like, it just makes it super easy peasy. I'm so, so blessed in that way. Because, otherwise, I was going to go back and forth to West Virginia, or I was going to have to get a hotel room, or, stay with a friend, which would have been so lovely. But it's really nice to go home late at night and just crawl into bed, get up early the next day and kind of pack up and then, do what I need to do in DC and head back. So anyway, I know it's a lot of information, but just kind of, the challenge of being outside of your space and your normal routine, and how challenging, but also how liberating that is. And what I mean by that is the amount of things that we got rid of. Pretty impressive. My hope is that as we're unpacking, we will continue to do so. The place is, so cleaned up with all the hair that was behind things that we didn't even know about. I can't wait to move back into my place with a new kitchen and a new bathroom because, for years, this place, this condo was renovated in the 80s. And so it has 80s appliances. It has 80s cabinetry, which is that like pressed board, which is like not even real wood, which is fine, right? It was fine for me for years. And then I just thought, why not upgrade? I don't have any plans on leaving this tiny little condo in DC, so why not, try to make it a little bit more fancy. Now, I'm going to put some images over in the show notes for you guys to take a peek at. I shared them on Instagram last week, so you may have seen them, but gives some mood boards and a little peek at what the kitchen ultimately may look like, right? They try to do these 3D images. So I'll share those over in the show notes, which can be found on the blog, KimberlyWilson.com/blog or /574, which is what this podcast episode is. So that's why, life has just been a little crazy over the past few weeks. Well, really month and prepping to get packed up and move and then get, all my stuff to West Virginia and unpack and what have you. So I share all this to just give a little insight into what's been going on, how I organize my closet when I actually have my closet right now. My clothes are laid out on chairs in Tim's guest room at the cabin in West Virginia. And I have it laid out by tops and bottoms on a chair, all black, of course. So I just reach for things. I know what they are and why I chose practice. And I hope that resonates with you all, even if you, I'm sure you chose many beautiful words. But as you think about practice, it's just a way of like, life is a practice. Every day is a practice, right? And so how can we show up and just think of this as, this is like from a growth mindset perspective of like, I'm showing up, I'm doing my best, I'm giving it all I can right now. And it may be different than what I could give yesterday, and it may be different than what I can give tomorrow, but it's a practice. And I hope you're excited about the memoir. I'm excited to share it with you, and I hope it will be helpful as people think about, shedding old skins, right? As we think about making transitions and growing, evolving, and how to kind of peel those layers apart. Not easy. And also, in the show notes, you are going to find a link to the virtual retreat, also a link to a blog post I did last week, and I spent quite a bit of time on it, and I hope it's helpful for anyone who would like to go on a jaunt to New York City. In December, I went to New York City for a weekend with a longtime girlfriend who I met at a Jivamukti teacher training in 2007. She's from Montreal. It was her big outing outside of the country, and it was the weekend where COVID, Omicron blew up in New York. Of course, we had no idea because, the data came out after that weekend. Well, we were very lucky. We did not get it, despite the fact that it just Broadway, so many things shut down the following week. And we were so blessed because we had a very normal weekend there. With masks and being vaccinated and all that good stuff. But still, it really, really shifted the following week. So we were very lucky. And anyway, I share my agenda and various spots we went to, in case that might be of interest to you. And again, there's a link in the show notes. And I'll also have my mood board for my new kitchen and bathroom, which hopefully, fingers crossed, will be done end of March. And I'll be sure to share the final results with you. And someone was like, will you do a video tour when it's done? I'm like, sure, it'll take like a minute, right? Because my place is so tiny, but I'm like, absolutely. So I look forward to sharing that with you. And, just a reminder, if you're not signed up for Love Notes, please do so. And there's a link in the show notes. And you can also go to KimberlyWilson.com and do that. There's also a link to my 6 books and planner. Follow along. I post somewhat regularly on Instagram. I am off of Facebook. I'm over on YouTube. And I'll get some new videos up shortly. And that's it. I hope this episode is inspiring in some way or enlightening as you think about, your start to the year and how it may not be kind of what you were expecting. And that is okay, right? I think of like the New Year's, this big launch into like all that's possible. And I had more of a slower start, right? Because I wasn't sure about my word of the year. I was still percolating on that. I was crystallizing my dreams, which is pretty clear there. And, I was packing up my life, so no big deal. Also, just a heads up, some fun podcasts around the corner with some really great people that I have interviewed and cannot wait to share these with you. So thanks as always for tuning in. I love hearing from you. And if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer in a future podcast, do not hesitate to reach out. And those of you who did offer some great suggestions, just know I am going to be coming back to those very, very soon. Have a delightful, delicious week ahead, and thank you again for being part of this community.